Great audience we have here in our studio, and we hope one of these days you'll be joining them. Well, let me just say that today, countless people gathered in Washington, D.C., but it wasn't to argue over the budget or taxes, foreign policy, or even the personal health of the president, but it was to stand for the value of human life. And today, the president made history as the first ever to address the crowd of pro-life people live.
You love every child, born and unborn, because you believe that every life is sacred, that every child is a precious gift from God.
Wonderful to hear that, because 45 years ago this week, the Supreme Court became the extreme court. That's when it ruled in the Roe v. Wade case that abortions could be legal based on the frivolous argument of privacy. Now, I say frivolous knowing that it's going to be considered provocative, but it was a ruling made out of thin air. And it was an illegal ruling because the Supreme Court can only interpret law. It can't make it. That is a power strictly limited to the legislative branch. And when I hear people say about a Supreme Court ruling, well, we have to follow it because it's the law of the land, I want to scream, no, it is not the law of the land because the courts can't make law. And in the case of Roe v. Wade, the U.S. Constitution says nothing about abortion, which according to the 10th Amendment means the power to regulate it is left to the states. If anything, that ruling that renders unborn babies as blobs of tissue instead of human beings should itself be nullified in that it violates both the 5th and the 14th Amendments that guarantee equal protection and due process. Since the barbaric and activist court of 1973 rendered that decision, 60 million unborn children died in what should have been the safest place on earth for a baby, its mother's womb. Now let that sink in a minute. 60 million babies. When just under 3,000 people died on 9/11, it shocked us and it shook us. And when mass killings at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, or the Sandy Hook School, Las Vegas, or the Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, took the lives of people in the double digits, the news went 24/7 to give us every detail. But more than 1 million babies a year have been sliced to pieces, suctioned out of their mother like dust from a vacuum, and even burned alive with a chemical solution. And instead of outrage, many people defend this slaughter with euphemistic language like women's health and a woman's right to choose. Sadly, the baby is not the only victim in an abortion. The birth mother is almost always herself a victim, having been talked into the procedure by maybe a boyfriend or a husband, a mother, or just a good friend. But what they don't tell her is that there's guilt that she will experience usually many years after what is simply called a choice. No one I know defends slavery anymore. The assertion that one human being can actually own another human being and treat them like property, even determine if they should live or die, that's repulsive. But abortion is based on the logic of slavery, that some human beings are just not worth as much as others. Further, if we wonder why we live in such a brutal and coarse culture, what should we expect? If we spend a lifetime telling several generations that some human beings just aren't worth much, why on earth would we expect a kind and caring social order? Being pro-life, by the way, is not simply being appalled at the mass killing in abortions. It's respecting the value of every human life is equal in worth and intrinsic value. You see, I believe that the child with Down syndrome is just as valuable as the captain of the football team. And holding that view, holding the view that some people are just worth more than others and worth saving, and some aren't, I find that deplorable. Now, on tonight's show, as we mark the 45th year of a radical court ruling that has devalued human life, you're going to hear some powerful first-person stories that you need to hear. So let me just say to you, stay put for the next hour. Phone a friend, tell them to join you and watch Because as a country, we can do better. And as a civilization, we must do better. It's hard to believe, but the great English writer and thinker G.K. Chesterton was struggling with the idea of babies being denied their lives way back in 1932. At the time, he was responding to people like Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, who sought to sterilize people of color, use birth control, and abort children in order to create her advanced standard of humans. 86 years ago, Chesterton wrote this in a weekly column to all who sought to engineer humans and to decide who should be born. The obvious course for a eugenicist is to act towards babies as they act toward kittens. Let all the babies be born, and then let us drown those we don't like. Well, Chesterton was trying to shock the public into recognition of this great evil of ending life in the womb. Today, you can actually hear ethicists talking about post-birth abortion. Yeah, that really is a thing. But let's get down to brass tacks and look at the hard truth about the value of life in America and just how cheaply we treat it.